Welcome everyone. I'd ask you to take your seats if you haven't already done so, and we'll make a start. We are still waiting on some of our panellists, but they are probably stuck in traffic or something at this time. So what I'm going to do is to call on the panellists who are here already, and then hopefully as they're speaking, the remaining panellists will walk in. So thank you and welcome again. I am going to give only some very brief remarks before we get into the thick of things. And that's just really by way of an introduction. You probably already know the background to the IGF improvements process. But for those who don't, there are certain elements of the mandate of the IGF that some stakeholders feel have not been fully implemented yet, including paragraph 72G, which states that the IGF should be in a position to make recommendations on emerging issues where appropriate. So this is one of the points that is addressed by the Indian proposal. The mandate of the Internet Governance Forum was extended when the Secretary-General issued a note in May 2010 in which he recommended that the mandate be extended for another 5 years, but also suggested that some improvements were necessary. So in response to that, in July, ECOSOC issued a resolution that there should be a working group of the CSTD, the Commission on Science and Technology for Development, formed to come up with some of these improvements. That working group was convened in December of 2010, and there were 42 members, including 22 states, 5 international organisations, 5 civil society representatives, 5 technical and academic community representatives, and 5 business representatives. And at the first meeting of that working group, one of the most detailed proposal that was tabled was from India, and where the title of this workshop is Reflection on an Indian Proposal. In a sense, it's not just an Indian proposal, because many of the same suggestions had been made by other stakeholders at various times throughout the last 5 years. But we're calling it that simply because that's the form in which it was presented to the working group. And certainly other members of the working group, some of them had similar ideas, and some of them so it's not really that India owns this set of ideas, but for convenience, they've collected them together into 10 points, which are listed up there on a slide, which you're trying to find out how to expand it to full screen. I think...
It's fine like that. It was fine before. No need for just hit F5.
there is a way to make it full screen again, but never mind. F5. Yeah.
If it's PowerPoint.
No, it's not. It's a PDF viewer. Full screen mode. There we go. Control L, full screen mode. Just go down to the previous... No. Back.
Page display.
That'll do. That's close enough. Close enough. Another interesting point to note is that the United Nations Secretary-General, in his note in May 2010, had asked for improvements to the IGF to be discussed at the IGF's 6th meeting, which is this meeting. And since there is no formal agenda item in the plenary sessions for discussion of IGF improvements, effectively this workshop and a similar workshop that's already been held are what the Secretary-General called for. So this is potentially a very important workshop, especially because we happen to have many of the members of the CSTD working group, and we also have the new chair of the working group, who has just been appointed, Peter Major, who's sitting to my side here. So we are very fortunate indeed to have such an illustrious group of panellists. I'm going to introduce them one by one. I'm not going to read out their biographies or even their job titles. I'm just going to give you their names and their institutions. The reason is that there's a background document that you can download from the workshop webpage, which has got the full biographies of everyone, so you can get all the details you need there. So when I call your name, for the benefit of the closed captioner who is here with us, could you please stand up so that she can see where you're seated, and I'll ask the panellists to come in late to do the same. So we have first Antti Peltomäki from the European Commission. Welcome. As I've mentioned, Peter Major from the chair of the CSTD working group. Ravi Shankar from the Government of India. And Siva Subramaniam Musuthami from ISOC India, Chennai. Later, unless they've walked in while I've been speaking, we will have Marilia Maciel from the Center for Technology and Society in Brazil, Raman Chima from Google, and Romulo Neves from the Brazilian government. Are any of those people here already? No. Hopefully they'll walk in the course of the workshop.
You should introduce yourself.
Oh, of course. I haven't introduced myself or my co-moderator. My name is Jeremy Malcolm, and my co-moderator is Izumi Aizu. We are the co-coordinators of the Civil Society Internet Governance Caucus, which has organised this workshop. So I said that I would be brief, and that's literally it from me. So I will hand over.
Just 1 second.
Yes, Izumi has a few comments.
Well, no comments, but for those who are the member of the CSTD working group in this room, could you raise your hands? How many are here? All right. So, for you guys, this will be an interesting warming up exercise for the next meeting that's scheduled at the end of October. It's a bit. Yep. So, without further ado, shall we introduce the panel?
Before that, I also omitted to mention that our remote moderator is not here. So if there are any, she's on her way, but she's also been stuck in traffic. So if there is anyone, I don't suppose they can even hear us, but if they can, I apologise that there's nobody to moderate your questions yet, but there will be. Okay, a couple of people are putting up their hands to volunteer. Yeah, maybe since you're closer, maybe if you could do that, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you very much. It must be the traffic is particularly bad today. So before I do hand over, let's just go through the slide. It is very simple. It proposes that the MAG would identify... Oh, it's disappeared. Yeah. There we go. The MAG would identify certain very specific key policy questions rather than the general issues of openness, security, etc. There would be certain specific questions that the MAG would identify in an open consultative process for the IGF to deliberate upon. The MAG would then establish working groups around these, again multi-stakeholder groups, which would develop background materials on the theme. Those would go into feeder workshops and roundtable discussions at the IGF. And once those had developed a level of maturity, it would be possible to then have a thematic meeting held intersessionally and perhaps partly online to discuss those issues and try and reach some or come a bit closer to consensus. Then the product of the thematic meeting would then go back to the IGF plenary, and possibly there would be more roundtables at the IGF. However, whatever mechanism works best to try and to solidify the IGF's response to the issue. Then there would be a report on those questions, which would include any dissenting views. It wouldn't necessarily be a consensus position unless there happened to be a consensus on certain points. And those reports would then find their way into the intergovernmental process by means of the CSTD, and there would be a feedback loop and interfacing with the relevant bodies to make sure that the outputs from the IGF had been received and thereby just didn't get lost in a sea of documentation, as is the case at present, where we simply have transcripts of sessions and so on that are really impossible to digest. So that's the essential elements. Now, the approach that we want the panellists to take is to be as specific as they can be about those elements of the proposal. You don't necessarily have to address all of them, but if you could say whether you agree or disagree, and if you disagree, please be specific about where you think the flaws in this proposal lie and how we could address them, what alternatives might exist, so that at the end of the workshop we hope that we will be able to create the bare outline of a response from this workshop to the proposal that we can present at the taking stock session. Again, we're not suggesting that we'll have consensus or agreement, but if we can say which points we agree with, which points we think may be problematic, that would be a successful outcome for this workshop. Marilia Maciel has just walked in, so if she could stand up so that if you could stand up so that we can see where you are. She's here. Our transcription lady needs to know where everyone is. So, without further ado, Antti Peltomäki, would you like to begin?
Thank you, and perhaps first of the caveat that whenever I'm now here representing the European Commission, but I think that first remark that there's no any kind of a coordinated position for the EU on these issues. Of course, there has been a couple of EU member states in the part of or members of this working group, but the European Commission has not. We haven't really positioned ourselves in relation to this initiative, but I think that perhaps whatever I'm now going to say are more or less than personal remarks and nothing to really perhaps reflecting officially any kind of EU positions. But I think that, of course, it's very well known that the EU has always been very clearly and then loudly advocating that kind of IGF as kind of a multi-stakeholder, non-binding nature. And I think that, of course, that's perhaps the basis that we are trying, or I am trying to assess this kind of a proposal. But I think that whenever looking at kind of elements and the list that you have just presented, I guess that, of course, it's a very fundamental question that are we trying to modify kind of IGF towards some certain kind of procedural tips of converging ideas that you could start to report, coming closer to kind of idea of setting certain kind of recommendations that are representing certain kind of consensual views on this and that. I think that whenever reading these kind of different steps that how this kind of could end up to the report, I think that I was starting to ask myself, is there any kind of a reality check made that how this kind of talk shop that IGF is today can start to really to behave a bit differently. Fine, I think that we have to recognize that even if I think that our understanding is that IGF has already over these years evolved, and I think it has really, I think that they're now covering much wider range of all different kind of stakeholders, both regionally as well as I think that in different kind of stakeholder groups. And I think that then it's also the question that it has that in terms of the themes also been able to so to say being reflecting what is in the air, what is kind of a real topics, and I think that it's some kind of a self-sustained evolution. But all in all, I think that of course whenever we have been discussing that is there whether IGF is a kind of a talk shop or talking circus, that it's not really, I think that ending up certain kind of concrete, tangible conclusions. Of course, I think that you are always then thinking of in these terms that what kind of procedural elements you could start to play with. And of course, I think that perhaps then, to my mind, it's not a question of one or two of the elements, but the whole of the idea behind this kind of view that we should end up certain kind of if not really consensus-based reports, but I think that some kind of emerging consensus, and then start to communicate between the other international institutions on the basis of these reports. And I think that then I have more questions than perhaps the answers, but definitely I think that on my own behalf, as well as I guess that I can speak on behalf of the Commission, that we are definitely ready to reflect and examine all the kind of elements that are in there. And of course, like all the other initiatives that have been presented lately, I think that this is definitely worth of studying more carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll hold questions until the discussion period at the end so that we can go through the presentations quite quickly. Next on my list is Marilia from the Centre for Technology and Society. So Marilia, over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy, and sorry for being late to help you organize the session. Yesterday I lost my wallet with all the money and credit cards, so I had to phone the bank this morning. It was a hassle. But anyway, I think that the point of departure of our discussion here is that the IGF needs to be improved. It has, over the years, been able to develop incremental changes. But at some point, I believe that it is important for us to consolidate the changes that we have implemented so far, and also to have a process to take a look at the IGF with a more long-term effort. So I believe that the creation of the working group has been a positive step on this matter. Well, the first step that I would like to comment, maybe we haven't discussed this enough, but I believe it's an important point. It's a financial accountability of the IGF. We have no clear information of how much the donors contribute to the IGF, how the money is actually being spent. This is not available on the website, and we have asked for information about this in the working group, but we have not received clarifying information about it. I believe it's a very important point, and we have to take into consideration also in-kind donations that are given to the IGF and that are not summarized together with the money donations that are given to the IGF. The second point is the issue of outcomes. I believe we have discussed this for many times, and I believe that it is possible for us, from the rich discussions that we have here, to be able to summarize not consensus, but different policy options that we can take to other organizations. Be it existing organizations, such as the ones that have a role in WSIS implementation, be it new organizations that are created. And I believe that it is important for us to move forward from the hysterical debate to say that one side says, no, we don't want a binding IGF. And it's important for us to recognize that none of us here are talking about binding IGF, neither here nor in the working group. So let's move forward and not waste time of discussion talking about binding or non-binding IGF. The other point that I would like to make regarding outcomes is that I believe that the outcomes discussion is an important one, and it has nothing to do with enhanced cooperation. As we have mentioned, enhanced cooperation and the IGF process are two distinct complementary processes, but two distinct processes. So I believe that we can't avoid moving forward with the outcomes from the IGF because we are kind of afraid that it will lead to enhanced cooperation. Enhanced cooperation may take place or not, but it has nothing to do with the IGF being able to offer more concrete outcomes. There are other organizations nowadays that it would be very useful if we could send the outcomes from the IGF to existing organizations. Another point that I believe it is important to mention regarding outcomes is the selection of workshops. If we want to have good outcomes, we need to have good workshops. And I am afraid that we have not been strict enough in the selection process of workshops. And when we do avoid to put a proposal forward, we are asked to reconsider it. I do understand that many people have made an effort to make proposals, but we can't accept every proposal. And we can't say that having a proposal from actor X from a developing country is a reason for this person to receive funding to come to the IGF. If we have a funding problem, then let's name the problem, let's give it the right name, and the name is funding. It's not workshop proposals. Another point, it's a MAG. I believe that the Indian proposal has been good in terms of strengthening the MAG, in terms of improving the number of MAG members, reinforcing representation from some actors that have been underrepresented, such as civil society in a MAG, and the idea of creating thematic working groups and strengthening coordination between the MAG and other international organizations, I believe it is a very good one. And the MAG could be an ally in this task to summarize inputs that come from the sessions in the IGF. Lastly, to finish, I could not avoid to talk about remote participation, which is a topic that is very dear to me. And I believe that we have seen in the process and during the discussions in the working group that remote participation has been a fundamental tool for more inclusion, especially from people from developing countries. It is very important that we set aside funding for remote participation. It has not taken place so far. We have to put it in the IGF funding, specific funding for remote participation. We had a major problem here. We almost didn't have remote participation because the remote moderators on site were being paid too little, something like 200 shillings per day, and we almost had that strike. So it is not acceptable that something that is so important to the IGF be treated like something that is, the last thing that you will think when you are organizing the IGF. And lastly, remote participation is very important, but it is also very important to bring people to the IGF. Remote participation is not a substitute for physical participation. So we have to discuss how to have more funding to bring participants to the IGF, especially participants who have not come to the IGF never before, and how to have clear and transparent standards to fund participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marilia. Okay, we'll have some comments during the discussion period about the funding issue from Peter here. So that's good. We will also, I would also like to welcome Romulo Neves, who has just joined us. If you could stand up so that the transcription lady can see where you are. Yes. And in fact, I might, since Siva is ready with his slides over there, I might bring him forward in the order of proceedings. So, Siva Subramaniam Musuthami from ISOC India, Chennai, would you like to give your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. See, I'll go over the proposals point by point with some comments. First is MAG to identify the most important global policy concerns, take into account current issues, focus on IG for development. This is a very pertinent proposal. There are changes taking place in every country that affect the way the internet works. Most of these changes are made in isolation of the deliberations of the IGF. India's proposal seeks to bring the current issues to focus on issues currently being dealt with in various intergovernmental organizations. And the next proposal is issue-based working groups of MAG members plus external experts. The words that are dropped are overall balance, diversity, developing country participation, both governmental and non-governmental. That reflects on commitment to multi-stakeholder constitution. There is a note of caution. It appears that this is a proposal for too many working groups. This could be. Sometimes when we depend on working groups for everything, we land up in a situation where there are too many working groups. And third proposal is about issue-based working groups during the preparatory process to develop background material, commission experts, prepare the format of the corresponding plenary session, select and review feeder workshops. Could be a very good way of streamlining MAG's work, but sweeping past working groups. They decide the format, they select workshops and so on. It could work very well, but how are they to be balanced? Workshops on various themes linked to the chosen key policy questions, feeder workshops followed by roundtable discussions, working group to attend feeder workshops, roundtable to further shape perspectives around the key question and look for areas of convergence. This really takes the IGF beyond the present level of inconclusive discussions, but what about the issues falling outside what are identified as core policy issues? So that is something that we have to pay attention to. And the fifth proposal is about thematic meetings or thematic IGFs between IGF sessions on the policy issues to facilitate dialogue and identify possible outcomes. There are regional IGFs on all issues, thematic meetings. So this could be too many meetings. On one track we have regional meetings, on another track we have thematic meetings, but still a very good idea. It takes IGF forward towards productive outcomes. But instead of having regional and thematic IGFs, I would like to propose, though it's a little unacceptable at the moment, why not we have 3 IGFs the way that there are 3 ICANN meetings every year, and each IGF will focus on one theme. So one IGF could be in one region focusing on security, another IGF could be in another region focusing on some other issue. So this is something that we could think about. And 6th proposal is on convergences and alternate views from the roundtable discussions and thematic meetings taken to the IGF plenary for a structured discussion. India's proposal is keen on outcomes. This is very positive. And 7th is working groups to produce a document on the concerned key policy question, presenting areas of convergence and divergence to present concrete set of policy options. I think for the first time, we are in harmony with the comments of the Government of India. So this is something that I raised during July 2009 as input for the comments on formal consultation with forum participants, July 2009, and I've given the link. This is more or less my comments reflect on this. And views generated on a specific policy question to form part of the working group's reports. Governments could adopt it as a convention to draw resources from IGF reference papers on the relevant issues, topics, while framing proposals for a new policy, change of an existing policy related to internet. And then 9th is IGF reports. It goes to CSTD, ECOSOC, then to UN General Assembly, then to policymakers. And India has very wisely given an alternate route. It said it could send it directly from IGF, or at least ask ECOSOC to send it directly without waiting for the UN General Assembly to go through its usual formal process. That's very thoughtful and practical. IGF to receive feedback on developments from governments, that's what I assume, ongoing international internet governance processes, interface with relevant bodies, facilitate discourses between bodies, different priorities. So this is from Tunis Agenda Para 2072. Again, India's proposal places IGF truly at the heart of internet policy. So this is probably the next generation of IGF, and so this is looking ahead. It could also include, I picked this up from what Marilyn said sometime back on some other context, I don't remember where. One thing that is highlighted is define and implement a funding model for internet governance. That is very important. If not straight away a funding model for internet governance, a funding model for the IGF at least.
Excuse, could you wrap up?
Yeah, last slide almost. Okay, and it talks about more voices from emerging markets and the private sector at the table. So there are governments who might be a little reluctant to adopt this India proposal, but I've brought a quote from Marcus, which is very relevant. It's here. He assures governments that, okay, the internet will stay and nation states will also stay. So it's not that internet will take away nation states. So with that, I think governments can confidently proceed towards India's proposal. And my question, what changed, what happened to the Indians between then and the IBSC meeting?
We're going to hear from... we're going to hear from Ravi Shankar soon, so we can ask, and we're also going to hear from Romulo Neves, of course. In the interim, is that the end of your presentation, Siva?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you mind putting the 10 points back up so that we have those for reference? Okay. Thanks very much. And yes?
One question. I saw the 10 points, and Marilia alluded to an element which was the composition of the MAG that I didn't seem to find in the 10 points. No. Is it an element of the proposal?
Okay.
Is it?
Okay.
I don't think the composition of the MAG... Is that maybe... Is that...
This is the annexure which is is actually the recommendation forming process.
Microphone.
One part of the whole thing.
That's fine.
Yeah, so there are comments on the MAG issue, but they don't form part of these actual bullet points. That's right.
Please use the microphone for the remote participants, okay?
Now, we have been joined by our final panelist, Raman Chima from Google. Are you still catching your breath, or are you able to launch right into it? Is that okay? Okay, thank you very much, Raman.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Jeremy, and I apologize for being late. Unfortunately, traffic governance and internet governance don't always work as efficiently together, but happy to be here. And I'll launch right into what I came here to say. And the first point was to just appreciate the fact that we're having even more focused discussions around the topics of internet governance. I remember the last IGF I attended, which was several years ago at Hyderabad, and the questions there were far more open, far more broader. And we can see how much is, perhaps I'm just spoiled that I haven't attended the intervening IGFs, but I have followed what's been taking place, and I've noticed a definite fact that there are far more focused discussions are taking place at this IGF. Many of the questions that we all talked about several years ago, in fact, already have answers, or if not answers, we realize they're not the correct questions to ask. We have new questions. We have new issues before us. And the Indian proposal that's been made towards the future of the IGF that was made previously, and the further developments that my previous panelists also talked about, indicate that we're going further and further into this discussion. But let me go into the main points here about what my reflections on the Indian proposal that was made towards the working of the IGF. But I first wanted to go into what seems to be our ask here, our underlying, what seems to be the philosophy behind some of the very well-considered proposals that the Indian government did make. One of those seems to be clearly to get more focused discussions, focused outputs, focused recommendations as to questions of internet governance, to make it clearer that the IGF as such does result in clearer answers on some questions, clearer standard setting, and more increased in democratic participation on the questions of internet governance, focused on the idea of development. And that's something that is important for us to remember. The Indian government and many other governments have played a laudatory role in increasing attention on the issues of development. For example, in issues about intellectual property, issues relating to the global commons at other organizations. And I believe that that might be part of the philosophy behind these current proposals as well. But let's go into some of the reflections on what I was talking about in terms of increased and more focused outputs. And that's something I wanted to go into here. So one of the proposals made forward has been to establish more clearer expert groups, experts who would be advising MAG, who would be able to tie into a series of feeder workshops, feeder discussions leading into the plenaries, as well as intersessional workshops that would be taking place in between. And my interest here was to note the fact that many standards and many principles that have come out in terms of internet governance, whether it's been from the Council of Europe, whether it's been from groups like the Association for Progressive Communication, from industry bodies as well, have seemed to have developed by themselves without having gone through a formal process. Yet, the IGF has been in a position where it's been able to, these issues have been able to, these standards have been shared and discussed at this forum meeting and is being fed into other UN systems. So my basic reflection here was that, in fact, isn't this already taking place? And perhaps are there ways that we can adapt the Indian proposal to even more easily take use of what's already there? Most engineers and even lawyers tend to have a bias saying, step on the shoulders of giants, build into what's already there so that you don't replicate faults. You add fewer moving parts to an already complex system. So I was just wondering in terms of, for example, the expert groups that were mentioned and the feeding process that is taking place, isn't that already taking place? Perhaps we need a more increased role in the plenary sessions and in the other, in the interministerial dialogue and even in MAG for the work that's taking place through other groups and through dynamic coalitions and other forms of organization here at the IGF. There's a comment that I've heard repeated from several stakeholders across the last few days is that there seems to be many IGFs. It's become better over the last few years, but there still seem to be many IGFs. But the point is to take across what's the best in every IGF and ensure that what you have is the most discussion and the most effective sharing of standards and the knowledge that everyone here is working so hard to create and to talk about and to feed into recommendations. So my main comment on the distinct point about expert groups and the working groups and the intersessional meetings that came up in the Indian proposal is there's definitely scope for that to be done. I am not completely sure on whether a more formalized process in terms of what's being discussed here, whether it'll be necessarily beneficial to all, because I suspect it might reduce input, it might reduce the ability of people to add discussion to the entire process of what's taking place here. But there's definitely a scope to be said that the existing formalized IGF mechanisms, particularly at MAG and the interministerial, could connect better into what's already taking place on the ground. There are parallels to be given, for example, at WIPO. At the WIPO, in the various sessions and working groups that it does have, it easily connects into non-governmental and academic discussions and knowledge creation, which tie into the main reports. Perhaps that's one of the underlying ideas here behind the reports component that was identified in the Indian proposal for the IGF, and which I believe many civil society members also suggested. So perhaps there's scope to be said that that could be more clarified, and the IGF Secretariat could play a greater role there. But I'm not completely sure on whether an absolutely new system, a parallel system, would necessarily bring the best for all of us here. The other part was my
Excuse me, would you wrap up shortly?
Yeah, is quickly on the last three elements of the proposal in terms of recommendations and responses. And again, I think the connection here, and that's an important element of the Indian proposal, is that it must feed into existing UN systems, existing UN bodies, and that's already taking place at the IGF. For example, the UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur has been making concrete international law, soft law, but there's still concrete soft law, that feeds from IGF discussions. So have other UN bodies as they and other intergovernmental bodies as they take part in these IGF meetings. So my response there would be that perhaps a lot of this is being taking place. We can figure out more concrete ways of guaranteeing that other stakeholders take part in these meetings, and that their norm setting is based on what's discussed here at IGF. But the question is, how do we do this? And that's something I look forward to hearing responses to as well.
Thank you very much, Ravi. And sorry, Raman, because we're moving on to Ravi Shankar from the Government of India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief about it. This is primarily a multi-stakeholder proposal, as was brought out by one of the panel speakers. But having given it an Indian flavor, has really spiced it up. Now, coming to the point, we have articulated the position that we would like the IGF to have an outcome orientation. And I think all of this, which has been stated, is in that genre. Quite a few things of the policy proposal and the thing, I'm not going into this thing. All of it are in consonance with the Tunis agenda. So the underlying thing is we are seeking change within the process of continuity. So all issues have been articulated in the Tunis agenda. The change that we are seeing is on the premise of improvements in the IGF. And we have felt that having it as an outcome orientation definitely helps. One more point which I would like to state here is that the funding of the IGF. The funding of the IGF, if it were from a single source, preferably the UN source, that would make it a much more cogent way, because often enough we find that there's a scarcity of resources. So I think we should ensure that the IGF Secretariat does not have scarcity of resources. We would like that the IGF Secretariat functions very fully and flexibly with the complete resource packing. Coming to some issues which my civil society member from India has been rather complimentary in many sense, but at the end of it left with a parting shot about the IPSA. So I would like to say the IPSA is a forum where my counterpart from Brazil is also here, and South Africa. It's in the process of the Tunis agenda. We have looked at carrying forward the Tunis agenda and trying to see that there should be the focus on enhanced cooperation. There also needs to be an outcome orientation. I think it's all in the genre, and I would like to say here that the dialogue that took place at Rio was primarily a first meeting. So it's basically come out with some draft ideas, and it grows through graduated process to the next level of summit. The summit, which would be a ministerial thing, would actually sort of firm up our ideas. And I think a number of stakeholders contribute to the IGF. The way in which OECD contributes to the IGF, and ICANN contributes to the IGF. In the similar genre, IPSA is one more entity which contributes to the IGF. I think it's a multi-stakeholder forum, as we all realize it. And we should look at it from that prism or the lens through which we need to view what are the thoughts put up. I would just like to thank the chair for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much indeed. And our penultimate panelist is Romulo Neves from the Brazilian government.
Thank you, Jeremy. Sorry also for being late. I'd like to be very brief because I'd like to hear the discussion here. But I'd like to say that Brazilian government supports the main idea of the Indian proposal, especially because we have a logical issue and a logical contribution to give for the discussion. That is the following. There are some things that are very important in a forum like this. The first one is legitimacy, and legitimacy comes from mandate, and it's an authority issue. And the second thing is participation. And following the logical way, the logical path, the mandate is already there. We have a mandate from the Secretary General to do this. The participation we need to improve. So we need to think about attractiveness. And within attractiveness, we have two elements. Funding, of course, to make it easy, the participation, especially for developing countries, and relevance. Following the logical path, within the relevance, we have two elements to improve it. The issues that are discussed here, so we need to take care about the relevance of the issues, and the following up policy. And I think the India proposals are talking about this point, and it's in my logical path, it's a very important thing. But the following up policies, and we can call it outcomes. We have some let's say classifications on it. It could be just reference, just feed for thought. It could be suggestions, declarations, public policy. So we have a lot of types of outcomes or following up policy. We need to think about that. How could we bring more attractiveness due to relevance and due to following up policy? Well, most of the proposals, the Indian proposals, are based on common sense. But common sense is not a simple thing, as you may know. So let's just give an example. To buy a house, the common sense says, to buy a house, you need to work hard and earn some money. This is the common sense. But the common sense needs a concrete plan for action. So it's not enough to say that. And I agree with Mr. Raman that some is already there. Of course, some is already there. But we need to think, how could we improve that logical path that I've described in my point of view, to bring some more legitimacy through attractiveness, through relevance, through the follow-up policy. And how could we turn into a concrete way to do it? Well, we need to think within the Indian proposal. Who will decide the key issues? There is already a policy on that. So could we improve it or not? Or could we just follow what it already exists? which criteria should be raised for the evaluation of the workshops, the thing that Marilia just raised? Is it enough, or could we improve it? Who will summarize and harmonize the, let's say, the following up policies, the outcomes or the declaration? I think this third question maybe is the main question to put forward the following policy element of my thought. And finishing, which channels within those outcomes would be dealt with? What would be the channel through the IGF outcomes should go to be, or just feed for thought, or reference, or something more? If you would like to bring more participation, we need to think about that. Maybe we could get a conclusion that 9% is already there. You need just to improve it. But maybe 10% we could improve to bring something more to IGF. I agree, I totally agree that there is a lot of IGFs, but I also agree that everywhere we could improve something. And I think most of you believe that. So, specifically about the Indian proposal, I would like to say that we need some more concrete indications to clarify what could we do to increase the legitimacy through participation, through the following up policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And it's apt that to wrap up we have our final panelist, Peter Major, the new chair of the CSTD working group. If you would like to present from here, we can advance the slides from there, just give your signal. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. When I said yes to participate in the panel, I thought that I would participate as a special advisor to the Hungarian mission to the UN. And my designation came last Friday at 4:30 in the afternoon. So all of a sudden I realized that well, the least thing I can do is to be neutral. And I tried to be neutral, and I'm going to be neutral. Having said that, I went through my presentation, which I wrote before my designation, and I found out that, well, it was neutral already. So it might have been a kind of anticipation of the events. So if we can go to the next one, please. Probably I would like to give some overview, the results and concerns of the IGF 1.0, and what I see as improvements as far as structure, financing, reporting, streamlining is concerned, and talk a few words about the working group and wrap up with some conclusions. So I think all of us do agree that IGF on its own is something unique. Its multi-stakeholder approach, which was initiated in 2005, even before, has taken up. And there is, I might say, the result of it is a kind of trust. It is not always there, but it's increasing. It is flexible and it's self-organization. That's the way I see it. I have attended the Hyderabad IGF. I went to Sharm. I went to Vilnius, and I'm here on my 4th IGF, and I'm still fascinated. Frankly speaking, it's something really extraordinary. We have no resolutions, no decisions. and it is non-binding. And up to now, what I heard from you, all of us do agree that this is okay. And it is trying to be inclusive, well, to a certain extent. Well, probably the degree of inclusiveness is up to debate, but to my understanding is inclusive. On the next slide, I'm talking about some concerns. What I heard, unequal representations, it is not streamlined, there is no reporting or real reporting, it has no real impact. The development issues are not really in the forefront, even though I think the major theme of this IGF is IGF for development. There is a degree of the cooperation is something to be questioned, and of course there are the questions of financing and the MAC composition. So if we go to the dilemmas, I've just listed a couple of them. Maintain flexibility versus streamlining. Should it be non-binding, or should we have decisions? Oh, in the worst case, resolutions. What about the multi-stakeholder approach? Should we maintain? I think there is no discussion that we should maintain it. What are the obstacles to participations to increase the inclusiveness? The budgetary issues, should it be a voluntary contribution based, or should it be a kind of regular budget? So that's what I heard today as well. As for the MAG, its composition is also a central question. Should it be a selection or an election-based MAG? And what in the Indian proposal, we have had very relevant points concerning the structure, a very elaborate scheme, if I remember correctly, how to select the members of the MAG. There is another issue which hasn't been mentioned here, the IGF and other WSIS-related activities. How do they relate? Probably this is also a hot topic to be discussed, if at all. And if we go further, the topics we are discussing during the IGF, should we stick to the existing topics, or should we take on the emerging ones and anticipate something? Finally, I think the Secretariat is also a kind of burning issue. Should it be an independent Secretariat as we have it now, or it has been also mentioned that it might be good that it would be integrated in the UN system. So this is something which we should consider. Naturally, these are not independent issues. They should be treated partly separately, but probably they will form a kind of overall view. I wouldn't go into much detail, so probably we can skip some of the following slides, and I would like to go to the IGF 2 topics. Probably I will make this presentation available to you, and just a few words about the working group and the way I see it right now, how we're going to proceed with the working group. I am really grateful that we have this workshop, because it gives it is a tremendous help to me, frankly speaking. So I'm here to listen, I'm here to understand, and in the end to summarize. And I try to reach out to as many participants as I can, and I'm very glad that I have the trust of I think of all stakeholders. So I am all ears to all the suggestions, all the considerations, and my view is that I would call the first meeting on the last day of October, that is following the ITU Telecom, and following the ICANN meeting in Dakar. I know that it's a very short notice. However, if we want to achieve something and go further, probably we have to do that. I propose to have a 3-day meeting at the outset. It will be held in Geneva. And based on the discussions here, and naturally based and mostly based on the inputs we had up to now to the working group, which really did some very good job, I have to admit, even though some of us feel it was a failure because we didn't come up with recommendations. I still think we have substance. We have substance to build on, and that's what I want to do, to build on the substance, to come up with a kind of summary what we have done up to then, including all the discussions we had during this IGF. And I'm confident that we shall come up with some positive results at the end of the day. So in conclusion, I am confident that the IGF is, in its nature, is a self-improving organization, a forum. It will be inclusive for all stakeholders, and we shall work on that, and naturally not forgetting the remote participation, which I think is also an extremely important thing. I'm also attentive to some remarks coming from some participants referring to enhanced cooperation. Probably if this is a concern that we have to deal with that as well. And finally, I think that by the end of March, when we have our last meeting, we shall come up with some recommendations. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. That was very illuminating. And I'm going to pass on to my co-moderator now. He's going to continue the debate with the floor. So thank you very much, Izumi.
I see 25 people wanting the floor, and we have about 25 minutes to go. So please identify yourself clearly for the remote moderation and also for the transcriber. First, I got Luis Magalias, our colleague at the CSTD working group, and already Nurani is speaking me, but many other hands are there to follow. Paul Wilson, and yes, and Jeremy, Jamil. Yeah, sorry. So, and Parminder. So others, Beltran, Maureen Kay, whoever else. Jump in, please. For those I don't know the names, please forgive me, but I cannot remember all of your names. Anyway, Luis, please.
Thank you very much, Izumi. Luis Magalhães from the Portuguese government. Any living body has, and actually should always have, room for improvements. And that's certainly true with the IGF, because it's quite alive, as far as I can notice. The 10 points that were presented on the screen regarding possible improvements of MAG are certainly worth consideration, as well as the procedure for the composition of the MAG itself, especially from the side of non-governmental representatives, which probably requires more transparency and a clear, organized scheme. And it's certainly elements that we can discuss, but we must be clear that the proposal we are talking about has other elements that are not contained on what was presented on the screen, and some of them deserve quite a lot of attention and discussion. Well, besides, I think that we must be very careful about this designation of Indian proposal. And the reason for that is because India, like so many other of us, is involved in more than one proposal that is attended and being discussed. And sometimes they are contradictory. And sometimes we think we are discussing a point, and actually on another proposal backed by the same government, we have contradictory points. I'm being very clear because we have little time, so it's better to face the issues as they are. So, for instance, India, together with Brazil and South Africa, are presenting a proposal that they want to move to the General Assembly of the United Nations, the so-called IPSA proposal, which, as it is stated now in written form, kills the multi-stakeholder process. It doesn't say it is against multi-stakeholder, but the proposals, the procedural proposals that it actually has, conceive the idea of creating a dedicated agency within United Nations systems, or else something within ITU that, working with United Nations procedures, will pursue the work and put together the work of several entities like IGF and ICANN. Now, let me be clear. United Nations procedures don't provide room for that sort of non-governmental involvement. And for us, this must be clear for all. These are not the rules nowadays. It is so much so that the IGF itself is not organized as a United Nations body, but it's convened under the sponsorship of the United Nations Secretary General. And the MAG itself is not a United Nations body. It's an advisory body to the Secretary General. And also, the members have to be formally nominated to be validated by the Secretary General himself. So as you see, to consider the multi-stakeholder environment, one had to actually go around and take special measures. Well, I heard that the IPSA proposal is still developing and there is room for improvement and clarification. As a matter of fact, the people related to the proposal with whom I talked seem to be talking about a different thing. So what I suggest is that it's better to improve the text so that the situation will be very clear and we can follow it. Well, I think on these issues, we should discuss details, but we have to avoid being distracted by micromanagement and actually, overlook the real big picture, because the big pictures determine very much what we can do. We should not forget that just 10 months ago, so very recently, the Working Group for IGF Improvements was asked to be only governments.
Sorry, please.
And India was a supporting government. So we see how contradictions are here appearing. So I hope that we can clarify that and we can come to a very constructive and system that supports and provides a new breath to multi-stakeholder involvement. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, we have 23 minutes, and now I see 30 people want to have the floor. Mindful, please. You want to have some quick reaction or clarification, or can wait? Then Nurani?
Yes, thank you very much. Nurani Nipuna from NetNode. I'm a member of the MAG and also on the CSTD working group. I could speak for half an hour, but I won't. It's a shame that we didn't leave more time for real debate here, because I think there are a lot of very interesting issues, and I think there are a lot of opinions in this room, so we could have had a very rich discussion. I have a few things to say, and I think it is very encouraging to hear that everyone in this room supports obviously the Tunis agenda and the multi-stakeholder model, but even when doing so, I think we need to be careful in when we talk about multi-stakeholderism, actually full multi-stakeholderism where everyone participates on an equal footing. And although the term is being used all the time, I see that in many different discussions, there are other interpretations of multi-stakeholderism where we are invited to the room but we don't necessarily allowed to fully participate. So when we speak about multi-stakeholderism, let's talk about it in its true meaning. It's encouraging to see that no one obviously wants to change the Tunis agenda mandate, and I think it might be worth reviewing that. So the Tunis agenda talks about a lightweight body. It doesn't talk about a very formal process with government representation different from any other stakeholders. I think we all agree, it might be worth giving a little bit of background to how the MAG was selected. Apologies if I speak fast, I'm just trying to make my points in my time. So the MAG in previous years, there hasn't been a formal process for the MAG selection. This is not a mistake, but it was simply also because in the beginning when the IGF was started, there wasn't, trust needed to be built, so to speak, and the Secretariat did a fantastic job in actually reaching out to the various stakeholder groups and selecting people that represented the various stakeholder groups. I think we have reached a point of maturity where we, I think everyone agrees, need to look at more formal processes of selecting the MAG. I agree with Portugal's point, though, in that we need to be aware of that the MAG is not a UN body. It's actually a group of experts that are selected not just because of their geographical representation, but because of their expertise. And this is very different from any other body within the UN. And I think there's a risk in moving away from this flexible system. I think that when we speak about outcomes of the IGF, I think we all agree. Someone yesterday said that the WSIS website is a beautiful but empty website. The IGF website is full of resources and very ugly. So I certainly think there are things we can do to improve. There's a fantastic amount of resources from the IGF. We can certainly improve that. But I do think we've found that whenever we try to enter into negotiating any texts, drawing conclusions from the IGF, we get stuck. So I think we need to be aware of that.
Thank you.
I want to make 2 more points. And
no,
that
just
is
one, please, for the sake of others.
Which one to pick? Okay, well, one is again, when it comes to the composition of the MAG, there's several aspects we need to look at. I think increasing the participation from developing countries is a very valid one, but we're looking at other types of diversity as well. Geographic diversity, gender balance, which is also very important. And if you look at the MAG, I know, for example, the balance between developing and developed countries have improved. In 2006, there were 48% from developing countries in the MAG, and in 2010, 64%. So I think when we look at how to improve the IGF, let's also look at what the facts actually are. Let's not raise or turn problems into bigger than they are. I certainly think we can do a lot to further improve it, but let's also stick to the facts when we discuss them.
Thanks. Now I have great sympathy to Peter, how to have a balanced participation of your discussion. Paul is ready?
Thanks, Azumi. My name's Paul Wilson from APNIC. I just had a small but quite sort of specific point about something that was said earlier that leads to a more general point about IGF improvements. And I'm not talking at all here about the India proposal, but about the remark before that there was no reporting from IGF. And I don't think that's quite true. I think actually on the contrary, there's a huge amount of reporting that comes out of IGF that comes through traditional media and also is distributed among the participants very, very widely, going out through Twitter and all the rest, not to mention the journalists who are here. So I think that's worth noting, that that's part of the IGF model that's around us here. I guess the point was actually about formal reporting, but the point I'd make about that is that the purpose, I think, of formal reporting is to help to inform people who aren't here. And I think remote participation, if it's working properly, actually probably also reduces the possible need for formal reporting in its traditional sort of form. So I guess what we all know is that the IGF is pretty unique in a lot of ways, and it's challenging a lot of the traditional paradigms that we're used to. So, and this reporting question may be an example if it was to become one of the points of potential improvement for IGF in future. But the more general statement I wanted to make then is that I think we should always be wary of sort of suggestions for IGF improvements which are based on actually in the old models that IGF is replacing or improving, more based in those and in assumptions about those than in what's necessarily actually needed. So again, I'm not talking about the India proposal there at all. It's a more general comment. Thanks.
Thank you. There's some clarification about the financial thing, Peter?
Yes, just very briefly, we had a meeting with UN DESA yesterday, the donor community, and the general consensus was that we had asked DESA to check with their accountants and legal counsel on what the rules of the UN are in order to make this more transparent. I'm not sure how much I can say about the finances, but just as a rough guideline, the budget currently of the IGF Secretariat that they have been using, let's say in 2010, was roughly a little under $1 million. There are a number of different contributions from governments and from the private sector. The percentage of private sector contributions per company is about 1%, roughly or less, so they're not having a major influence. And also the money is channeled through a trust fund at UN DESA in New York, and of course the rules of that means that any donor does not have any influence on how the money is being spent. And also, especially for my company, we have very strict transparency rules. I'm not supposed to give any directions to the United Nations on how the money is being used, and I think that's how the other companies follow as well. We have given the clear signal to the United Nations that we would like them to be more transparent about it and find ways of how it could be made more public, and they have to check, however, with the legal counsel and their accountants on what's permissible and what not, and what level of detail. Okay, so that's just for clarification. So the message has already been received, and already yesterday we've made the moves to instruct the UN. Please make sure that there's more transparency. And as a add-on note, the finances for today and looking forward, because of the very uncertain situation about the appointment of the special advisor and the appointment of the executive coordinator, there have not been as many donations in this year as there used to be. There has been a carryover from the previous year of roughly $275,000. There have been some contributions, but I would encourage everyone who has the well-being of the IGF and the functioning of the Secretariat in their mind to see how much they can donate to the United Nations for the continuance of the IGF Secretariat. They would be surely welcoming contributions. I hope not on the level of $50, because the administrative effort to manage that would be higher than the contribution received. So please dig into your pockets and make major contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi. Sorry.
Can I add something to that? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Thank you. Just a specific one. I'm looking at the proposal and looking at paragraph 6 of the annexure, and it says, IGF plenary, the convergences and alternate views from the roundtable discussion and thematic meetings will be presented to the IGF for a structured discussion. A structured discussion with a wide participation as possible. There's some grammar here that's missing. But the point being that this is the crux of it. There'll be a lot of discussions. There'll be, what topics will be discussed. At this point, at paragraph 6, comes the point where a decision will have to be made as to what things are going to go forward or not. And if it's not that way, there are alternate views. One view that says it should be done one way, and another view that says it should be done another way. Who's going to decide at the end of the day? I'm just thinking that if it eventually does go further than this to the UN bodies, etc., or as it says over here to the IGF report will then end up with the CSTD, etc., who decides? I'm concerned that the structure that we have right now allows us to, whatever sector we come from, to debate, to discuss. If you're going to find a situation where suddenly we're jockeying for this very divisive positions, I'm concerned about the ability for many people to be able to work together, and the division that may be created. So I'm just trying to figure out, what is this decision-making at all that may happen as far as paragraph 6 is concerned? I could be wrong. Maybe there is no decision. But where does it lead to? Just a question.
Could you say your name to the transcript?
Oh, sorry about that. Zahid Jamil from Pakistan.
Now I have Marilyn, Parminder, and I'm sorry, I don't...
Timson.
Yeah. Jimson and Bertrand, Henrietta, Raul. Am I missing somebody? Shiva? And Craig, yes. Okay, then Mary?
Thank you. My name is Marilyn Cade. I'm very excited to have had this workshop and the workshop that happened yesterday. I'm a member of the CSTD working group, and we have received a very large number of suggestions. And I think I want to focus primarily on funding. Marilla and I have had a conversation. I've had conversations with many of you. I think we must take the responsibility of understanding the importance of providing adequate funding. We are institutional. We're supporting a structure that is trying to support other functions, and we must give it enough resources to be effective and to be meaningful. And that means that I hope in the CSTD working group that we are going to be very serious about a effective funding mechanism which is reliable, predictable, and sustainable. I have studied very hard about whether or not funding could go to the UN budget. I think it's quite out of the mandate of how the working group is set up. But I think there's another problem, and that is in the UN called Committee 5, which basically is nothing new, and there is a 3% budget cut UN-wide. So if we were to change the mandate, which is what would be required in order to move the funding under the UN, we would also imperil the even survival of the IGF, because Committee 5 accepts no new activities, nothing new, and they're cutting everything 3%. So I have two concerns about funding. I think the community, this is a multi-stakeholder, bottom-up ecosystem, and I think the community of stakeholders can adequately fund it, and that we can find a mechanism that makes it predictable and sustainable. As to the question of transparency, I too, like Peter, have approached the UN to ask for different approaches. You can believe that we are trying to do that. But I think the bigger question is, we want a big list of improvements. So we have to, in the working group, also be realistic about funding that big list of improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. And Parminder now?
Parminder from IT for Change. The first thing, I'll talk about larger issues. I think the proposal on the table, which is being called the India proposal, I bet is within all public policy making systems in the global arena, the most bravely multi-stakeholder process. There is no other place where other stakeholders are proposed to be given such kind of clear role and power to shape the agenda, authoritatively communicate outcomes, talk to people, and I bet anybody, the great champions of multi-stakeholderism here, can bring out and show me a model which is more multi-stakeholder than this model on the table. It is the biggest multi-stakeholder proposal in a whole global public policy space. And I'm not talking about technical policy making, which is completely a different ballgame. So let's not confuse in public policy space, this is the best proposal. It's the most multi-stakeholder proposal. Now, the paradox, yeah? The paradox is that a lot of people who seem to support multi-stakeholderism have been a little or little more than little resistant to this proposal, and a lot of people who get presented as being against multi-stakeholderism are pushing the proposal, and it needs to be investigated, thought about what really it is about. Now the question comes, which Zahir also raised and Noorani raised a bit. How would you do it? And people agree, yes, that's a good proposal, but it fails because it can't be done. Now there is again a paradox. It comes to also what happened between this proposal and Rio. A lot of people say that global internet policy should be made in a multi-stakeholder manner. Even the hard policy should be made in a multi-stakeholder manner. But if you cannot have a process which could succeed even in soft policy shaping, you yourself say it would not succeed. And I heard 3 or 4 people say the process won't succeed. What is the basis of your saying that hard policy making should be multi-stakeholder is an answer which should be given here. And this is a place where we should experiment with the soft process, invest into it. If it fails, we are no worse off. Let's sit down and trust it. And now comes the basic question. who thinks there is a need for global public policy making and who thinks there is no need for global public policy making is a prior issue which we have to solve. Developing countries think that the internet social system is being shaped without public participation. We need public policy to be made, and therefrom we would come which mechanism makes it. Now to say, I mean, rich people have half of the town, and they say it's going to be difficult to set up governance systems because, you know, these things are murky, they don't work. It doesn't work because there are people who want governance systems. They want public policy issues to be solved. Therefore, we need a process. And the best way to experiment is in the IGF to have a multi-stakeholder process shaping the policy, giving outcomes, and then think, yes, if we succeed here, what can we do at the hard policy level? When that's what the IPSA proposal, you don't like it, you have to come up and say, this is intergovernmental process, we don't like it. This is what we like. The process cannot be criticized without telling what should therefore be the process of global public policy making. When you say, you criticize without saying what it should be, then you just don't want it, and the public policy making is already happening. It's happening at OECD, it's happening by the private company consortiums, and at OECD, again, is a closed process. So I think this is something which is evolution over everything else, and I simply don't see anybody who supports multi-stakeholderism not supporting this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Parminder. And Jeremy and I just murmured that maybe we can extend another 10 minutes, but since most people have other agendas after that, so we'll perhaps finish around 10:40. So please be mindful. And Jimson, please.
Thank you. I'm Jimson Olufuye, WITSA. Well, it's quite heartwarming to really underscore the fact that we have more than 100% support for IGF because even the United Nations officials in most cases have gotten feedback to the effect that they also support the system, and they even desire that it could be replicated even at the global level. So I think where we could really incorporate improvement is regard to how the outcomes feed to the developing nations, because the issue of internet for development is actually for developing nations. And from my experience thus far, many countries in the developing nation do not have a grasp of the issues, are yet to really have model of multi-stakeholder approach. And if I were to use the example of Nigeria, just of late indeed that we begin to see it practically happening in our country. And I think this is where we should focus on. How do we get the IGF to really have a tab on how this outcome really filter down to the grassroots? And most of these outcomes will still be implemented in national jurisdiction. So I think we need to find a way to focus on how we keep a tab on how the outcomes filters into the developmental program of developing nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gibson. And now, Bertrand, it's your turn.
I want to thank the IGC tremendously for having forced everybody to come and actually look at the document. Because presuppositions about why some document is being put in place and so on is running all through the list of paper that we receive. And so there is always this knee-jerk reaction, oh, it comes from that group, or it comes from that group. So I already have a position in pro or against. I will not get into the details. I just want to thank very much both India and Brazil in pushing the discussion and setting up the agenda. The only point I want to make right now, and there are many other comments that are possible, but the only point I want to make right now is that we insist very much on the self-organizing nature of the IGF. And I think it is extremely important. And we have right now the opportunity to demonstrate that. This afternoon from 4:30 to 6, there's a room 2 that is empty. I would suggest kindly to Peter Major that very informally and with the agreement of the Secretariat, those who are willing to continue this discussion, because we all want this discussion, even if there are parallel workshops that we may want to attend, take the opportunity and get together. Or even use the lunchtime and make a table to get around Peter and give some discussion. What I just would like to highlight here is that the time is not necessarily at that stage to get into detail of the proposals. What I want to say is that what I loved really about the combination of the Indian discussion, proposal discussion, and Peter's slides is the notion of scales, i.e., each of the proposals by India, or so-called Indian proposal, is actually a solution that is related to a general issue, which can be the power of the MAG or not, in terms of agenda setting or decision making for the process, in terms of what is intersessional, etc. So there are headlines that will structure the work of the working group. The Indian proposal is a specific positioning of the cursor in a range that is usually going from very informal to very structured, very distributed to very centralized. And every discussion that will take place in the working group will have to use those three layers. The issue we're addressing, like composition of the MAG or intersessional work, of degree of reporting. The definition of the parameter range and the scale between one extreme and the other. And the final tuning, which is where do you put the cursor on each of those issues? But if the working group could already clarify consensus on the two different first layers, it would be a tremendous work forward. So I don't know if Peter was willing to try to hijack the room too at 4:30, but as for one, I'm very happy to go there if it is possible.
Thanks. For the IGC, we have the workshop on network neutrality at the same time, so we'll be split. And I hope, Tran, if you do something, please share that one as much as possible together with others. We have 9 minutes and 4 speakers, so 2 minutes each, please. Henrietta?
Thank you, Izumi. Henriette Esterhuizen, APC, and a member of the CSTD Working Group on IGF Improvements. Thanks for convening the workshop. It's been very useful. And I think it is useful to discuss one proposal in depth. I think that can, unfortunately, also result in overlooking some of the other proposals that have been made. I think I want to focus just on a few things that I feel is missing from this very useful proposal. And the one is looking at the overall mandate of the MAG and the accountability of the MAG to the IGF community. And I think that by overemphasizing the composition of the MAG and making sure it's representative, the proposal overlooks this fundamental role of the MAG, which is to distill input from open consultations and channel that into IGF organizing. I like the idea of the working groups, though, because I think MAG working groups on key policy issues, which are identified by the IGF community, not by the MAG, will be very useful. I think the working group idea, we've proposed it for a long time. I think I prefer the key policy issue working group idea than working groups on all main sessions. Simply just based on experience of this year, it's very hard to have functioning working groups when you have so many. I'd rather have a few really good ones. Issue of composition, structure has to follow function. And I think it will change over time. Challenges will change over time, and so we need some flexibility. Transparency, absolutely important. I think what's missing is enough of an emphasis on the fact that this is a group of individuals. And even if you use a representative model, such as proposed by India, to compose it, once they are in that working group, they need to work as individuals rather than as representatives. And therefore, working methods and facilitation and leadership and chairing becomes extremely important. And then just quickly, one proposal that I think is missing is, which was one that APC put forward, is that to split academic community from internet technical community, which would give us more depth. At the moment, civil society has to share our slots with the academic community, and that kind of marginalizes us. And I think that's the final point.
Thank you. I'm sorry for my voice. After 3 days of IGF, I'm suffering some. As it has been pointed out by Professor Magalhães and also by Marilyn, IGF is not part of the UN structure. And I understand that according to the IGF mandate, it is impossible to be funded by UN. it is something that should be checked before continue discussing that, should be checked with some legal advisors in UN. And so the only way to fund, to include IGF expenses in UN budget would be to change the mandate, as Marilyn pointed out too. And I think that this is a very delicate thing. And I think that there is not, there will not be enough support for opening a discussion about changing the mandate of IGF, because once we open the discussion for changing one small things, we can change. There will be also proposals for changing other things, and we will have the risk of losing the support of some stakeholder groups. The IGF is the result of a very long and very accurate discussion and a very delicate work in Tunis in 2005. So I beg you all to please be responsible and think very well, think twice before opening a discussion about changing the mandate of IGF. About transparency, as a donor, we receive a letter, usually a letter from UNDESA, with the information of the IGF expenses. And I think that this information probably is available in some part, somewhere within the UN public information. I don't know. But in any case, it is not a problem of the current IGF secretariat format. It's a problem of UN. It is UN that manages that information. So I don't think how involving more formally UN, we will solve this problem. I think that's what Peter and Marilyn have said regarding working with UN in order to have more information public about IGF expenses is the right way to go through. Thank you.
Thanks. I have Shiva, Craig, and one more person just raised, and that's about it. 60 seconds each, please.
I was full of praise for India's proposal, but when Parmender said that's the most multi-stakeholder proposal, I knew that something must be seriously wrong. So I went back to my presentation. I went to point number 9, and I have a question. So it's actually the first point is that Government of India proposes that IGF report should go through CSTD and then to UN General Assembly. Why does India want to route everything through UN? Don't you think the role of CSTD and UN should be lightened rather than strengthened? You are strengthening the role of CSTD, you are strengthening the role of UN. You want everything to go through UN. Why is that? On whose advice is this drafted?
Excuse me, use microphone if you like to.
It's one route, it's one process which is going like this, but there are other parts where there's a direct communication with other organizations, which Raman also I think pointed to. The India proposal, if you go through, there's direct communication from the IGF to all organizations. But there's one thing, once you come out with an outcome, you can't leave it on the table and go out.
Thank you.
That's it. So
okay, that's it. And Craig.
Yeah, hello. I'm Craig Riley. I represent the U.S. government on the working group. I'll be very quick. I think at the core, this proposal will cause a shift in the operation of the IGF. Currently, people come to the IGF to present their ideas and concepts for consideration by the wider global community. But I think what would happen in this proposal is you would come to the IGF to present your proposals and ideas to be included on the report or the recommendations that will unfortunately be written and decided upon by some small group of people. I don't think that leads to an expansion or transparency in the operations of the IGF. In fact, I think it limits those two things. So this is why we have a fundamental difference on this proposal, and we would hope that we would not go down this road, because we think this is what actually happens within the UN in these types of sessions, and we don't think the IGF should mirror this. Thank you.
Thank you. The last.
Okay. Thank you. I won't take more than 5 minutes. My name is Nurmeen Al-Saadani. I represent the Egyptian government at the working group of the CSTD. And actually, I would like just to mention that I'm really very happy of today's discussion and yesterday as well. I think improvement of the IGF is very, very crucial at this point in time. And for this, I would like to congratulate Peter Major for his newly appointed as the chair of the working group. And I would like then to pose a question, if I may, to Peter, and maybe provide an advice, if you allow me, about how are you going to plan the meeting on the 31st of October? Because, you know, we have been working with the working group for about a year now. We have faced so many frustrations, following in the trap of too many procedural issues and not much of the content. We have produced very, very good documents in March meeting and as well in May, and I think we need to plan well how are we going to handle the 31st meeting of the CSTD working group to avoid some issues or dilemmas that we used to face before and move into thorough discussion and hopefully to reach concrete outputs and deliverables. And of course, we are all here and we can further discuss maybe informally with you how can we move forward to avoid such dilemmas as we used to face before. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the congratulations, and I would like to tell you that probably you have been talking on everyone's part, and during the real work, probably we should only concentrate on that issues, that is the work. I fully agree with you that we have produced documents, we have produced a lot of things, and I am confident that we can build on that. I don't really want to go into procedural details. I am sure that I have the full support of the Secretariat of the UNCTAD. So to my best hope, by the beginning of our meeting, we can come up with a summary of the documents which we have received. That is extracts from the compilation which was put forward during the previous meetings, which was a 120 plus document, which we, to my best hope, we can reduce to some kind of handleable document. And I think our discussions, we are going to discuss the points in this document. But this is also up to discussion, and what I suggest to follow Bertrand's proposal to come together in an informal way this afternoon. I'm not sure about the time you said. It's 4:30 to 6 in room 2, and anyone who is present here, or even those who couldn't make it, are.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I am holding a scenario summit in room 2. So I am in room 2. The program is wrong. We're doing a scenario summit, and I hope you'll all come to that. So if you
anyway, thank
Bertrand,
you.
thank you for building my audience.
Marilyn, thank you. I think then I have to go to the Secretariat of the IGF and ask for some other solutions. But I think the idea is really excellent to come together, to continue our discussion in an informal way, and I'm all ears to your proposals.
Okay, we need to go plan B.